Hi there, and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast, where we make adulting easier by making money easier. This is your host, Lauren, and I'm joined today by Brennan Schlagbaum, a 31-year-old entrepreneur and personal finance influencer. But there's more to the story than that. When Brennan and his then fiance, Erin, were normal 24-year-olds building their life, they couldn't shake the oppressive feeling that their mountain of debt gave them. Before they even said I do, they had a mortgage, student loans, car debt, and consumer debt totaling over $300,000. As a numbers guy, Brennan is a CPA. He couldn't live like this. Fast forward to today, the Schlagbaums have paid off all their debt and eclipsed $1 million net worth. During their journey, it became clear to Brennan that he was meant to help others realize and achieve the same financial success that they had. Thus, Budgetdog was born. Currently, Brennan and his wife, Erin, live in Dallas, Texas, with their daughter, Logan Lee, and another on the way. Thanks for joining me, Brennan.
Thanks, Lauren, for having me.
Really excited. But first, I want to let everybody know today's podcast episode is brought to you all by House Money Media. Tom Brickman, the Frugal Gay, Alan Corey, Real Estate Maximalist, and me, Lauren Keene Almond from Adulting is Easy, have joined forces to launch new generation of real estate investors by forming House Money Media. Sign up for our real estate investing mentorships and masterminds at housemoneymedia.com. Space is limited. Take action today. And again, that's housemoneymedia.com. Real estate content with personality. Our goal for today is to make adulting easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, since managing money is a huge part of adulting. So today, Brennan, we're going to talk about investing for your kids. First, though, I was curious, when did you know you wanted to be a father?
Interesting question. So I grew up in a pretty big household. I was the oldest of four boys. Erin, my wife, she was the youngest of three, and she had a sister and brother that were older. I kind of always had the idea, like, kids were in my future, but we didn't really know when. We didn't know, at what stage of the game we wanted them. We came into the marriage at 23, 24-ish. And we, like you mentioned earlier, we hit a lot of debt. And so to bring more children into the mix during that disaster, the dumpster fire, seemed like maybe premature. And so we really wanted to get a good grip on that. And, fast forward, I think it was about 29. I think I was 29, 30 years old when we had Logan. And I think that was the right time. Now, obviously everything works out for a reason, but that's kind of where we landed. And then we quickly after, even with the challenges we've had with her, brought in, we have another one on the way. So September 20th, we're pretty close to it, but it was kind of always one of those things I expected to have children. I just didn't know how many. I still don't know how many.
Right. Well, I told you before we started recording that I'm pulling for September 17th. So me and the new baby can share it. Because actually you and I have the same wedding anniversary, which I think is
I saw that the other day.
I was like, wow, that's wild. Okay, but I digress. So tell us more about Logan Lee.
Yeah, so she was diagnosed with what's called Dravet syndrome. Perfectly normal, pregnancy, normal birth. We sensed right away, my wife and I, that there was something off. We couldn't really pinpoint it. All of our parents were like, "Oh, this is just your first kid. She's probably, that's you guys are adjusting to parenthood." And I'm like, there's something different. And we couldn't really pinpoint it. Then lead to, I think it was January 29th of 2022. Not that I remember that date or anything. She had her first seizure. And that sparked the beginning of what we found out was Dravet syndrome. So 2 days later, we went to the hospital. Even the doctors were like, "Hey, this is sadly somewhat normal for new children. Every once in a while, kids have seizures early on and they adjust." Well, 2 days, it was actually less than 24 hours later, she had her second. And we were like, there's something going on. And so we tried to figure out what that was, obviously. And within probably about a month, we kind of figured out, we got gene testing done on our end. We got gene testing done on her end. They found out what was called the SCN1A gene. And we actually we didn't have the issue or whatever. It was a total mutation. 1 in 16,000 children are diagnosed with this. So it was definitely like, whoa, what are we dealing with really quickly? Lots of seizures, lots of, behavioral issues, lots of the everyday parent wouldn't understand what you actually are doing. They take a lot of things for granted, and no shame to anybody or shout at anybody else. It's just the normal everyday stuff, light, sound, literally anything. We went to the aquarium yesterday for the first time ever. And that was a huge first step, because the reflections, the loud noises, the echoing and all that stuff, 7 months ago, we would not have been able to do that. It would spark a seizure. So there's been a huge adjustment with the way we live, the adjustments. We moved all the way across the country down to Texas. Like you mentioned, we live in Dallas now. The first 30 years of our life, we lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, Northern Kentucky area. And we had to get special treatment for her. We found out one of the best doctors in the world lived here. And we were like, okay, boom, that's where we need to go. And we basically picked up and left as soon as we figured out what she had, what that looked like, from a life perspective. And we're like, we want to put her in the best possible position. If we would have had her, let's call it 5-6 years earlier, this would have been a lot more challenging. So the lifestyle we have now versus then was a lot different. We had 2 W-2 jobs. We had the regular debts everyone had. Those things kept us with the payments every single month. And then fast forward to where we are now, my wife doesn't work. I obviously run my own business. We have ultimate flexibility. We always joke, we have the time and the money now. We don't have the health. So it prevents us from using the time and money that we have. And so our number one focus is to get her healthy and get her in the best possible position. There's going to be challenges like anything, but we're very confident we'll master this.
I'm sorry that you guys are going through that, and for Logan.
No sob story. It's all good. Like it's a big devastating thing. I'm not going to lie. It's not what you expect, but we are very, very proactive and very confident about the situation.
And I love that you're bringing so much attention to the syndrome, which I had certainly never heard of until I saw probably you tweet about it. So
yeah, it's 1 in 16,000. It's one of those things, and we didn't know what it was. We're like, what is this? Like, we had to figure out everything from the get-go. So, but we're pretty confident about it. Obviously, there's going to be challenges here and there. She's doing tremendous since we moved in Dallas in January 3rd of this year. Cross my fingers, nothing so far. So it's been close to 300 days seizure free.
Amazing. Congrats. Well, let's hope she hits that anniversary soon.
Yes.
So she's going on 2 then. When did you start investing for her?
Yeah. So we actually started before she was born. So a lot of people don't understand that you can actually do that. Now, we didn't do it like way premature or anything like that. Probably about 4 months before she was born, I opened a taxable brokerage in our name, which is a really cool opportunity for a lot of parents. And a lot of parents don't realize they have that option, but it's really in our name. So it's our account, but it's earmarked for her at a later date. The second account we opened was a 529, but it was in my social security number. So we just transferred that to her upon birth, once she got her social security. And the third one is a Roth IRA as well, but that one's we can't do a ton. She needs earned income. She's a 1-year-old. So there's only so much you can do from a baby modeling perspective, which is what we use it for within the business. But a couple hours here and there, we start the IRA. I think there's $1,000 in there at this point in time. And she's only 1.5. I mean, it's a great start.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. I was going to ask if you can invest before a child is born. Are you investing? So you're investing for baby number 2? Is it about time?
We are. So we actually just made that move as well. So I always say, like, if you don't have a child on the way, I wouldn't just start investing for a kid, right? Because it's like, hey, life, who knows what happens with your life going forward? Like, obviously everyone expects to have children, but you could have complications, all that kind of stuff. We purposely did it about 4 months before each child was born, just with the intention of like, hey, obviously we're getting close. We want to set this up. We want to get this rolling. And we have the ability to do it before they're born. So like, to get that compound interest ball moving, why not? And so that's what we did. You can absolutely do it. There's different ways you go about it. Like, our first one was the brokerage in our name. So that's just a regular taxable brokerage in your name. So anybody can do that. We will gift that to her at a later date with the tax laws that are in place. The 529, anybody can open that and save for their own education. And so you can put that in your actual social security and then just transfer upon birth and switch the beneficiary and all that kind of stuff.
Can you say a little more about what a 529 is?
Yeah. So 529 is purely for education. And you can actually use K through 12, which is phenomenal. Now, a lot of parents aren't going to use a 529 for the K through 12, but you have that flexibility. Let's say your kid's getting to 10th, 11th grade. You don't see a college education in the future or post high school education. You're like, well, why not take some of that money and utilize it towards the schooling that we have now? And you can absolutely do that. So pretty much educational costs, there's tremendous tax benefits from it with the tax-free growth for qualified educational expenses. It's hard to go wrong if the intention is to save for college.
Are 529s state by state? I'm asking because of the Ohio to Texas move.
Yes, good question. So we actually lived to make my life way more complicated, we lived in Northern Kentucky. We say Cincinnati, Ohio, because it's on a border, right? So we lived in a suburb of Cincinnati. So you actually can, every state has their own 529. And here's what what I always tell everyone. Every state 529 is entirely different. You have different investment options, you have different fees, you have different, stipulations, tax benefits. And that was one of the things for us. So we lived in Kentucky, like I said, so our state was Kentucky. There is no tax or state tax benefit for the 529. For our contributions into that account, nothing. So we looked at it as like, well, is Kentucky's 529 reputable? Does it make sense to invest in it? We still live here, et cetera. And I was like, I'm not really in love with it. It was kind of high on the fee side, wasn't the best investment options in my opinion. So we went to Vanguard because we're big Vanguard fans, and they're actually in the state of Nevada. Now, it doesn't really matter which state you're picking, except if you are trying to get that state tax deduction. If you're trying to get the state tax deduction, make sure you're in the state that you're operating in. But some, you mentioned from Kentucky to Texas, Texas has no state income tax. So there's also no benefit here. So we kept ours with Vanguard, even when we made the move, and it's not the end of the world or anything like that. It just happens to be the state that we live in, doesn't have a state income tax, which is not all that bad.
Yeah,
property
exactly.
taxes kind of stink, but
yeah. We don't have a state income tax here in Florida either, but
yep.
and the property tax is the bad. It's the insurance that gets us here, but everybody has
crazy.
every state has their thing, right?
Yes, it all balances out in my opinion.
So I was wondering about Logan Lee, are there any additional things that need to be taken into account for investing for her because of her special needs?
Sure. There's something called an ABLE account. And so some people with special needs will want to consider this. Now, we didn't go down that route, just given her condition. She seems to be there, pretty good and pretty able at this point in time. But the ABLE account is really anyone who developed a qualifying disability before the age of 26. Now, in 2026, that's increasing to the age of 46. So that would be an adjustment. The contribution limits are very similar to the tax laws we talk about now, 17,003. It is a great account for somebody that does have a disability that doesn't know what the future looks like, or doesn't have full confidence of what that looks like. And that's definitely an alternative, and something people with special needs do want to consider.
So what you're thinking about there is, will this person be able to take care of themselves or not? Is that kind of the thought process?
Pretty much the thought process. We had some issues with even our trust and what she qualifies for Medicaid and stuff like that. And she was at that stage early on. We were like, we don't know what this looks like. As she's grown and developed, we've seen she's pretty on par with where the average kid is. There are some challenges for sure, but we think we're pretty confident with the updated medications, our proactiveness with therapies and all of that. She will be pretty well off. Again, there's only so much we can control. But
of course, why should parents even be investing for their kids? What's the point?
This is such a hot debate on Twitter and social media and stuff like that. Everyone's like, well, are you going to create a trust fund brat? It's like, that's not really the goal here. Like you can set up your trust, and we have done as such as you'll get certain amounts at different times, depending on what your situation and what you've done. So you can have so many different stipulations, literally anything and everything that you would want in there, you could put in there. So you can do that. And I think the biggest thing with the idea of saving for your children is we want them to have the ability to live the life they want to live. We don't want them to dependent on a job. We don't want them to have to do X, something they hate. At the same time, you're not just going to get a handout from dad, in my opinion. So I'm not just going to hand you money and let you go blow it on Lamborghinis and cigarettes like my trust fund attorney has said in the past. We want to make sure that money's put to good use. We want to make sure you're smart, you're responsible with that. You understand the values that come with that and what that is for the future generations to come. Because if you don't abide by that, well, trust says no, sir. And you won't get that. And so that's just something we have, set up is you get it if you deserve it and if you put the work in. And I also kind of believe in a sense that the child should know from a value-based perspective, hey, mom and dad are saving because that's what we should do, but they don't need to know the amount, in my opinion. So I don't care to tell her as she gets older, hey, we have X dollars in this account. I think it's kind of a cultural thing, right? we save for our children. We want to better our future generations. We want to give the opportunity. We want to give. That's a big piece of this as well. Like, I don't want to just give you, I want to take this money, give it to you so you can make the world a better place. And that's kind of like the whole mindset around investing for your children. So my opinion is do it in the right way. Don't just create trust fund babies, as the term implies, but create trust fund babies in a good way.
I just read the book Die with Zero, and it talks about basically the optimal time to give money to a kid. And I don't remember the exact range, but it started, I think, at like 26, which I thought was interesting. I thought that was maybe lower than I thought. And it's like to like 40 or something, because the reverse of that is you give them what, when you pass away, you give them the money. So they end up getting what, money from you when they're 60. Yeah. And if they're your kid, especially, or, mine, they're not going to need money when they're 60, theoretically, because they're going to have, they're going to have some knowledge and, so we're going to teach them, and we're also going to show them so that they don't need it then. So I think that's a point that a lot of people miss, is like, what happens later on? My grandmas, my parents are in their 60s. My grandmas are still alive. Yeah. That's not who would, whereas you can create kind of generational wealth and help with businesses and growth and investing and all of these things if the kid is like 26. But like you said, they've got to be the right kid, right personality, and the right gotta have a, what do they say? They gotta have their head on their shoulders the right way.
I'll even speak from experience. Like, one of the biggest reasons we don't do an UTMA or UGMA, as they term it, is because that's the child's account no matter what. At 18 or 21, depending on the states, I think some states are 25 even, you get that money, the kid receives that money. And so let's say they're 18, they go off to college and they're not in line with what mom and dad think. Well, they can take that 25,000 that's saved and go do whatever they want with it. And we don't want to create the opportunity for that potentially to happen. So that's why we opt for the brokerage account in our situation.
Yeah, I think they could buy some cigarettes and rent a Lamborghini.
Pretty easily.
That's good. I'm glad you brought up the UTMA and UGMA, and Lord forgive me, I took the whole CFP course. I forgot what those stand for, but
the CPA.
Yeah, like, okay, they're basically, they're for children. They stand for different things, and there's some nuances between them. But I'm glad you brought those up, because I was going to ask why you're not using those. So that's huge, and I think that's kind of like the blanket statement that people see a lot. How should I invest for my kids? UTMA, UGMA, blah blah blah. And I think people sometimes just take that as gospel, and they really should know about the other options that, like, you're using.
It also impacts student aid pretty substantially, 20%. I mean, it's like, that's not really favorable in my opinion. So I'm like, not only does the kid get this money no matter what, but also student aid is going to hurt their the qualification process. So it just doesn't really, in today's world, with the brokerage option as an alternative. And, even on Money Twitter, we've ran simulations of like both options with the tax benefits of that versus the brokerage. The brokerage usually wins, or at least breaks even. So with that, coupled with the other two benefits of the student aid impact, as well as, the other ones, like, it just doesn't make sense in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. So is there anything you'll do different? I guess Logan Lee is only a year and a half going on 2, but is there anything you'll do different for number 2 than you did for number 1 in terms of investing?
We have a pretty solid, I'd say, framework for most children, I think. And we have the extra ability to the Roth IRA potentially for the second as well. Like I said, it's going to be limited. Now, as they age, there'll be more ability to, save more money there as well. But the brokerage and the 529 is going to be pretty, I'd say, set. Now, the 529, interestingly enough, with the Secure Act 2.0 coming up in 2024, that's a big adjustment. There's going to be some changes there. There is potential as they age, and what I see them going for, like, from a professional career, that we kind of shave that off and then move that to the brokerage as well. And just basically take the funds that we're putting there and putting them over here, or a portion of that or whatever. That's a wait and see. We don't really know at this point in time, but that's really the only adjustment that we'd probably make. Also, the IRA with age, where they have more responsibility in the business and stuff like that, they can help more, they get paid more. That will increase as well. So that's a huge benefit as well.
Okay, last question. How do you balance investing for you and investing for your kids?
Yes, take care of yourself first. I always say that. And that's not a selfish thing. Like, I know parents, like, they want to naturally help their children. That's great. But like, if you don't have your retirement set and you are trying to get them to college for free, well, what happens when you're 65 and you don't have retirement, and all of a sudden you're declining in health and age and all that kind of stuff? You go into a nursing home, who's going to be, liable? Your children are going to feel liable at that point. So it's like a reverse, and it's like, it doesn't work that great. So it's always good to make sure you're set up first, make sure everything's, your Coast 5, whatever you want to call it, you're set up for retirement, early retirement, even if you want to. Then look for the children to give them that benefit and that head start that maybe you never got.
Is there anything else you want to add, Brennan, before we wrap up?
The biggest thing for children is don't overcomplicate it. There's 5 primary vehicles that I'd say most people use. The 3 that we talked about: brokerage in parents' name, the Roth IRA, 529. We mentioned the UTMA and UGMA as well. It's potential. The 5th one we didn't talk about, and Lauren, you probably respect this, is the real estate. Buying a property at birth or something like that, letting it, a 20-year loan to where they're right out of college, or it pays for their college or something along the lines of that. There's so many different ways you can go with the real estate, but buying that property, giving them that house at that age, letting them pay off college with it, selling it, whatever you want to do. There's so many different flexible options. That would be an alternative that would be really cool.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for bringing that up. We all know that is my favorite topic.
Yes.
So why don't you let people know how they can get in touch with you? And I will put these in the show notes as well.
Yeah, you can go to Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, anywhere. Send me a DM, I guess not on YouTube, but Instagram, it's all Budgetdog. Twitter is Budgetdog_. I had to be complicated there. Somebody took my Budgetdog @ on Twitter. They have 0 followers. They aren't active, and they stole it.
I know that is frustrating. Well, I feel the same way about Instagram. I'm like, I am at Adulting is Easy on Twitter. I'm at Instagram at Adulting is Easy Real. Dang it. Hey guys, I'm on YouTube as well at Adulting is Easy. This video will be posted there along with some YouTube shorts. If you like this episode, you'll also like episode 27 that's going in the Wayback Machine, Teachable Moments for Kids, and episode 129 with the Wealth Dad. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Brennan and I have made adulting a little easier for you.